They called her Grandma Ghost as she silently cleaned their messes, her hunched figure nothing but a shadow in the Yakuza's smoky bar. For 2 years, she endured their mockery, invisible and voiceless, while dangerous men laughed. They placed bets on making her cry. They spilled drinks for her to wipe. Not once did she complain. Not once did she look up. Until the night the boss himself arrived and spotted what no one else had noticed. The edge of a blue chrysanthemum tattoo peeking from beneath her collar. His face drained of color as recognition hit. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of hidden identities and unexpected power intrigue you, please consider subscribing for more. The Black Lotus stood in a narrow side street of Tokyo's Shinjuku district, its elegant facade illuminated by a single lantern that cast a warm golden glow against the night. From the outside, it appeared to be merely another upscale bar, catering to businessmen and tourists willing to pay premium prices for authentic atmosphere and exceptional whiskey. Few who passed by would suspect that beyond the main bar area, through a doorway guarded by a stone-faced host, lay the true heart of the establishment, a private room where members of the Haradagumi Yakuza gathered nightly to conduct business, celebrate successes, and maintain the complex web of relationships that defined their organization. It was in this back room that Naoko Kimura worked, moving like a shadow between tables, collecting empty glasses and wiping away spills with mechanical efficiency. Her small frame was perpetually hunched, creating the impression of an older woman, though her actual age was impossible to determine beneath the surgical mask that covered half her face and the faded cloth cap pulled low over her eyes. Shapeless gray clothing hung from her thin body, and she walked with a pronounced limp that seemed to pain her, especially on rainy nights like this one. To the men of the Haradagumi, she was simply Grandma Ghost, a nickname that had stuck after someone observed that she appeared and disappeared like an apparition, never speaking unless absolutely necessary, never making eye contact, existing purely to clean up after their revelry and excess. If they thought of her at all, it was as a piece of living furniture, no more worthy of acknowledgement than the chairs they sat upon or the ashtrays they filled. "Oi, Ghost, you missed a spot." Daisuke Hasegawa's voice cut through the hum of conversation in the room, drawing laughs from the 3 younger Yakuza members seated with him. At 42, Daisuke had achieved the rank of lieutenant within the Haradagumi, a position that granted him certain privileges, including the unspoken right to make the cleaning staff's job as difficult as possible. Naoko turned without expression, moving toward the table where Daisuke had deliberately spilled sake onto the floor. As she knelt painfully to wipe the liquid, Daisuke casually dropped his cigarette, grinding it into the newly cleaned surface with his immaculately polished shoe. "Clumsy," he commented to general amusement. "Now you'll have to start over." Naoko said nothing, retrieving a fresh cloth from her cleaning cart and methodically removing the cigarette residue. Her movements were slow but surprisingly thorough, as though each task required her complete concentration regardless of the difficult or indignity involved. 5,000 yen says I can make her cry before midnight, Daisuke announced to his companions, loudly enough to ensure Naoko could hear. "The ghost is particularly pathetic tonight." "You're on," replied one of the younger men, a recent recruit eager to impress the lieutenant. "Though you've been trying for months without success." "Everyone breaks eventually," Daisuke replied, stretching his legs to deliberately block Naoko's path as she rose to return to her cart. She hesitated for just a moment, then carefully navigated around his extended feet, maintaining her silence. Behind the bar that separated the main area from the private room, Junko Mori watched this interaction with carefully neutral expression. At 30, she was one of the few women allowed in this inner sanctum of the Haradagumi's territory. Her position as head bartender, earned through a combination of exceptional skill with cocktails and the protection of her uncle, a senior member of the organization. She had witnessed Daisuke's particular cruelty toward Naoko for nearly 2 years now, ever since the older woman had been hired as the night cleaner. "Enough, Daisuke-san," Junko said, her tone professional but firm as she approached with fresh drinks. "The boss wouldn't approve of wasting good sack just to torment the help." Daisuke's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly at the gentle rebuke. "The boss isn't here, is he? Besides, what does it matter? Look at her, she's barely human. Probably can't even understand what we're saying." Naoko continued her methodical cleaning, as if she hadn't heard the exchange, moving to empty an overflowing ashtray at the next table. Her gloved hands worked with the same careful precision she brought to every task, no matter how degrading or unpleasant. The night proceeded as most did at the Black Lotus, Yakuza members arriving and departing, business discussions conducted in carefully coded language, occasional bursts of laughter, or heated debate quickly contained within the soundproofed walls. Through it all, Naoko moved silently through the haze of cigarette smoke, collecting glasses, wiping surfaces, and emptying ashtrays with the regularity of a clock mechanism. At precisely 1 a.m., she took her scheduled break, disappearing into the small employee bathroom at the back of the establishment. It was the only 15 minutes during her 6-hour shift when she was truly alone, free from observation or mockery. Inside the cramped space, she locked the door and leaned against the sink, allowing her shoulders to straighten slightly as she studied her reflection in the spotted mirror. Behind the surgical mask, a pair of dark eyes looked back at her, not the dull, defeated eyes one might expect from someone enduring constant humiliation, but sharp, alert eyes that registered everything with precise calculation. She removed one glove carefully, revealing hands that, while certainly weathered, showed unexpected calluses across the knuckles and palms, inconsistent with cleaning work, but perfectly aligned with years of martial training. A noise in the hallway outside caused her to quickly replace the glove and resume her stooped posture. By the time she unlocked the door, the transformation was complete. Once again, the invisible grandma ghost, beneath the notice or concern of the dangerous men whose territory she navigated. As she re-entered the main room, she noticed a subtle shift in energy. Junko was polishing glasses with unusual intensity, while several Yakuza members spoke in hushed tones, glancing occasionally toward the entrance. Naoko kept her head down, but adjusted her path to bring her within earshot of their conversation. "Tomorrow night, definitely," one man whispered. "First time in months." "Everybody needs to be on point," another replied. "No screw-ups. The Oyabun doesn't visit often." Naoko absorbed this information without visible reaction, continuing to clear empty bottles from a recently vacated table. The potential visit from Ichiro Harada himself, the head of the Haradagumi, represented a significant deviation from routine. In the nearly 2 years she had worked at the Black Lotus, the Oyabun had appeared only 3 times, each visit carefully choreographed and prepared for days in advance. She was contemplating the implications of this news when movement near the window caught her attention. A black sedan with diplomatic plates had parked across the street, unusual for this area, particularly at this hour. Naoko's posture shifted imperceptibly, her body tensing in automatic assessment before she consciously forced her shoulders back into their habitual stoop. Her eyes, briefly sharp and alert, cataloged the vehicle details, the positions of every person in the room, and the nearest exits before she deliberately dulled her gaze once more. The momentary change hadn't gone completely unnoticed. From behind the bar, Junko frowned slightly, having caught the cleaning woman's uncharacteristically quick assessment of the room. But the bartender's attention was immediately required by a demanding customer, and the brief anomaly in Grandma Ghost's behavior was forgotten as quickly as it had been observed. The remainder of the night passed without incident, Naoko completing her duties with the same silent efficiency that had made her simultaneously invaluable as staff and invisible as a person. At 4 a.m., she collected her meager belongings from the employee locker room and slipped out through the service entrance, beginning the familiar walk to her tiny apartment in an unfashionable district 30 minutes away. The following evening arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation at the Black Lotus. News of the Oyabun's impending visit had spread throughout the staff, resulting in frantic cleaning of the already immaculate establishment. Fresh flowers appeared in simple but elegant arrangements. Premium bottles were prominently displayed behind the bar. Even the lighting seemed adjusted to create the perfect ambiance of exclusivity and respect. When Naoko arrived for her shift at 10 p.m., she found the usual routine disrupted by this flurry of preparation. Junko was instructing the regular bartenders with unusual intensity, emphasizing the Oyabun's preference for a specific whiskey served at precisely the right temperature. The security staff had doubled, with unfamiliar faces positioned at strategic points throughout the establishment. "Ghost, in here now!" Daisuke's voice carried from the private room, the edge in his tone suggesting heightened stress. Naoko obediently pushed her cleaning cart toward the back room, where she found several senior Haradagumi members engaged in last-minute preparation. Daisuke stood near the center table, his usually impeccable appearance even more polished tonight, his custom suit bearing the subtle sheen of genuine Italian craftsmanship. "The entire place needs to be spotless," he instructed, without looking directly at her. "If I find a single speck of dust when the Oyabun arrives, you'll be looking for new employment. Understood?" Naoko nodded once, her face revealing nothing behind the surgical mask. "And make yourself scarce once he's here," Daisuke continued. "No one wants to see you shuffling around during important business. Stay in the shadows where you belong." "The boss will expect clean ashtrays throughout the evening," Junko interjected, entering with a tray of freshly polished glassware. "She'll need to maintain her regular cleaning schedule, just more discreetly." Daisuke scowled, but didn't contradict the bartender. "Fine, but if you disturb any conversations or spill anything, you're finished. The Oyabun doesn't tolerate incompetence." Naoko bowed slightly in acknowledgement and began her work with even more careful attention than usual. For the next 2 hours, she methodically ensured that every surface gleamed, every ashtray was immaculate, every glass spot-free. Her movements remained slow and deliberate, but there was an additional precision to her work tonight, a focus that might have seemed incongruous with her apparent age and infirmity had anyone bothered to notice. As midnight approached, the atmosphere in the Black Lotus grew increasingly tense. Regular customers had been politely turned away, leaving only confirmed Haradagumi members and their closest associates in the private room. Conversations were conducted in hushed tones, with frequent glances toward the entrance. Naoko was emptying a small wastebasket when disaster struck. A young Yakuza member, nervously adjusting his tie in anticipation of the boss's arrival, bumped into her cleaning cart, sending a bottle of cleaning solution crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass seemed amplified in the tense atmosphere, drawing every eye in the room. "You stupid old woman," Daisuke hissed, striding over as Naoko knelt to clean the mess. "Tonight of all nights." His hand connected with the side of her head in a casual slap, not his full strength, but enough to send her small frame sprawling awkwardly against the wall. The room fell silent, not out of concern for the cleaning woman, but from discomfort at the display of uncontrolled anger on such an important evening. "Daisuke-san," Junko said quietly but firmly from behind the bar. "We need her to clean. The boss will be here soon." For a moment it seemed Daisuke might escalate further, his face flushed with stress and anticipation. Then he visibly composed himself, straightening his tie and smoothing his hair. "Clean it up," he ordered Naoko, who had already righted herself and begun gathering the broken glass with gloved hands. "And then stay out of sight until specifically needed." Naoko completed the cleanup with the same mechanical efficiency she brought to all tasks, giving no indication that the blow had affected her beyond a slightly more pronounced limp as she pushed her cart toward the storage area. Once alone among the cleaning supplies and extra linens, she took a moment to adjust her mask and cap, ensuring that her features remained properly obscured. From this vantage point, she could hear the sudden hush that fell over the main room, followed by the murmur of deferential greetings. Ichiro Harada had arrived. Taking a deep breath, Naoko reached beneath her cleaning cart to a hidden compartment concealed behind the spare trash bags. From it, she withdrew a small object wrapped in black cloth, quickly tucking it into her pocket before anyone could enter the storage room. Then, resuming her stooped posture and vacant expression, she pushed her cart back toward the main room, prepared to fade into the background as the evening's true business began. The atmosphere had transformed completely in the brief minutes she had been absent. Ichiro Harada sat at the central table, his presence commanding the space without any need for raised voice or dramatic gestures. At 58, the Oyabun carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to absolute authority. His tailored suit spoke of wealth without ostentation, and his only visible concession to Yakuza tradition was the missing portions of his left, little and ring fingers, typically concealed by immaculately maintained hands, but momentarily visible as he accepted a glass of whiskey from Junko's deferential offering. Surrounding him were his most trusted men, including his personal bodyguard, Takuma, whose vigilant eyes continuously scanned the room, even while his posture suggested relaxed attention to the conversation. The regular Haradagumi members maintained a respectful distance, honored to be in the Oyabun's presence but careful not to appear presumptuous by approaching uninvited. Only Nesoko continued her work without acknowledging the power shift in the room. She moved along the periphery, emptying ashtrays and collecting glasses with the same methodical care as always, her head bowed, her presence so minimal that conversations continued uninterrupted as she passed. Yet, for the first time since she had begun working at the Black Lotus, someone was watching her. Ichiro Harada's gaze followed her momentarily as she shuffled past his table, a flicker of curiosity crossing his otherwise impassive features. It was the briefest of observations, lasting only seconds before he returned his attention to Daisuke's detailed report on recent territory developments. But it represented something unprecedented in Naoko's carefully maintained invisibility. The evening progressed with the careful choreography, typical of Yakuza formal gatherings. Business was discussed in measured tones, respect was paid according to rank and seniority, and alcohol flowed freely but was consumed with restraint in the Oyabun's presence. Throughout it all, Naoko maintained her peripheral existence, appearing when an ashtray needed emptying or a spill required attention, then fading back into the shadows between tasks. "The woman," Harada said quietly to Junko during a lull in the proceedings. "The cleaner. How long has she worked here?" The question, though softly spoken, caused Junko to straighten attentively. "Almost 2 years, Harada-san. Never misses a shift. Never causes problems." Harada nodded thoughtfully, his expression revealing nothing of his interest as he watched Naoko methodically wiping down an empty table. "Her name? Kimura. Naoko Kimura," Junko replied. "Most of the men call her Ghost. She keeps to herself." The conversation shifted to other matters, but occasionally throughout the evening, Harada's gaze would return to the cleaning woman, observing her movements with the careful assessment that had helped him maintain leadership of the Haradagumi for over 15 years. Near the bar, a young Yakuza member named Ryota was becoming increasingly inebriated despite the formal occasion. Recently inducted into the organization, his arm still healing from his first significant tattoos, he was eager to impress the senior members, but lacked the discipline to moderate his drinking accordingly. "Hey, Ghost!" he called out as Naoko passed with her cleaning cart. "They say you were beautiful once, before whatever accident made you a cripple. That true?" Several nearby Yakuza members chuckled, emboldened by Ryota's disregard for the somber atmosphere. One leaned forward, adding to the fictional narrative. "I heard she was a dancer before she got burned in a fire. That's why she wears the mask." No, another countered, the alcohol loosening tongues despite the Oyabun's presence across the room. "She was Yakuza wife who displeased her husband. That limp isn't from age." Naoko continued working as if she couldn't hear them, though her movements became perhaps a degree more precise, more controlled. She wiped the counter near their drinks with the same careful attention she gave to every surface, neither slowing down nor hurrying away from their mockery. Across the room, Harada observed this interaction with narrowed eyes, noting both the men's disrespect and the cleaning woman's non-reaction. Almost casually, he dropped his chopsticks on the floor near his feet, then waited. Naoko, attuned to the needs of the room despite appearing oblivious, noticed the fallen utensils and approached with appropriate deference. She knelt painfully to retrieve the chopsticks, keeping her head bowed as she offered them back to the Oyabun with both hands, as proper protocol dictated. "Thank you," Harada said directly, possibly the first time anyone had thanked her in the establishment. Naoko nodded without speaking, careful not to make eye contact, but as she turned away, Harada's gaze lingered on her hands. Even through the thin cleaning gloves, certain calluses were visible, patterns inconsistent with someone whose work involved primarily wiping surfaces and carrying light objects. He leaned slightly toward Takuma, murmuring something that caused his bodyguard to begin watching Naoko more carefully, his trained eyes now assessing, rather than dismissing the hunched figure, as she resumed her cleaning rounds. The evening continued with increasing levels of alcohol consumption among the rank-and-file members, though the senior leadership maintained their composure in the Oyabun's presence. As midnight gave way to early morning, the carefully maintained formality began to fray slightly around the edges. Conversations grew louder, laughter more frequent, movements less controlled. It was in this atmosphere that a drunken Yakuza member staggered backward from his seat, directly into Naoko's path, as she carried a tray of empty glasses. The collision should have sent both the man and the glassware crashing to the floor. Instead, Naoko executed a subtle pivot, simultaneously stabilizing the drunk man with one hand while keeping the tray perfectly balanced with the other, a movement requiring strength, coordination, and reflexes entirely at odds with her apparent age and infirmity. Realizing her mistake instantly, she immediately followed the smooth motion with an exaggerated stumble, nearly dropping the tray to reinforce the impression of elderly clumsiness, narrowly avoiding disaster. But the momentary display of physical control had not gone unnoticed. Harida's eyes met Takuma's across the room, a silent communication passing between them. The Oyabun made a small gesture, and Takuma leaned down to speak quietly to Daisuke, who nodded once before approaching Naoko with a predatory smile. "Clumsy ghost," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Let me help you with that." Before she could react, Daisuke deliberately knocked into her cleaning cart, sending an entire tray of glasses crashing to the floor. The shattering sound silenced several nearby conversations as all eyes turned to the commotion. "Look what you've done now," Daisuke said with false concern. "Better clean it up quickly before someone gets hurt." Naoko knelt among the broken glass, methodically collecting the larger shards with gloved hands. Daisuke stood over her, watching with unconcealed contempt. Then, as if by accident, he shifted his weight, stepping heavily on her outstretched fingers as they reached for a piece of glass. The pressure was significant, enough to cause genuine pain, even to someone with considerable tolerance. Yet Naoko's reaction was minimal. A slight intake of breath, barely audible, and continued collection of glass shards with her uninjured hand. No cry of pain, no recoil, nothing that would be expected from an elderly cleaning woman. Daisuke frowned slightly, then increased the pressure, grinding his heel against her trapped fingers. Still, Naoko's reaction remained controlled, muted. Her body tensed slightly, but she made no sound beyond a soft exhale. It was at this precise moment, with Naoko stretched forward beneath Daisuke's deliberately placed foot, that her careful disguise finally failed. As she reached for a distant piece of glass, the collar of her shapeless workshirt shifted just enough to reveal what lay beneath. The edge of an intricate tattoo, blue chrysanthemum petals inked with master craftsmanship against her skin. From his position across the room, Harida had a perfect view of this momentary exposure. His expression changed instantly from mild curiosity to intense focus, his hand raising slightly in an abrupt gesture that silenced all conversation in the room as effectively as if he had shouted. "Everyone out," he commanded quietly, "except the cleaning woman." Confusion rippled through the gathering, but no one questioned the order. Even Daisuke stepped back immediately, removing his foot from Naoko's hand without comment. Within moments, the room emptied of all occupants except Harida, his bodyguard Takuma, and Naoko, who continued collecting broken glass as if nothing had changed. The door closed behind the last departing Yakuza member, leaving an unnatural silence in the typically bustling back room of the Black Lotus. Only the soft clink of glass shards being placed in a dustpan broke the stillness as Naoko completed her task with the same methodical care she had shown for nearly 2 years of employment. Hirata watched her work for several long moments, his expression unreadable. Then, when the last piece of broken glass had been collected, he spoke in a tone completely different from his previous command, softer, but no less authoritative. "You can stand up properly now," he said. "There's no need to continue the performance." Naoko continued collecting the last few glass fragments, as if she hadn't heard Harida's words. Her movements remained slow, methodical, the same careful routine she had performed countless times during her employment at the Black Lotus. Only after every shard had been deposited in her dustpan did she pause, still kneeling on the floor before the Oyabun. "Stand up," Harada repeated, his voice carrying neither anger nor urgency, merely the calm certainty of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Your disguise is impressive, but unnecessary now." For several long seconds, the only sound in the room was the muted nightlife of Shinjuku filtering through the soundproofed walls. Then, with deliberate control, Naoko placed the dustpan on her cleaning cart and rose to her feet. The transformation was subtle at first, her hunched posture straightening incrementally, her shoulders squaring, her chin lifting from its perpetual downward tilt. By the time she stood at her full height, she appeared to have shed years along with the fabricated stoop. She still didn't speak, her dark eyes watching Harada from above the surgical mask, with an intensity that had never been visible during her months of servitude. "Remove your cap and mask," Harada instructed, his gaze never leaving her. Takuma shifted his position slightly, one hand moving inside his jacket to rest on what was undoubtedly a concealed weapon. The bodyguard's expression remained impassive, but his body language communicated clear readiness to intervene at the slightest threatening movement. Nyoko's hands rose slowly, first removing the faded cloth cap to reveal short black hair streaked with premature gray, cut in a utilitarian style that could be easily concealed. Then, with equal deliberation, she untied the surgical mask, letting it fall away from her face. The woman revealed was not the elderly cleaner everyone had assumed, but someone in her mid-30s with striking features marked by a distinctive scar that ran from her left temple down to her jaw. Her bone structure was elegant beneath the deliberately cultivated pallor, and her eyes were sharp, assessing, utterly at odds with the vacant gaze she had maintained for nearly 2 years. Harada studied her face with the focused attention of someone confirming a suspicion. "Aoi Kage," he said finally. "The blue shadow. You're supposed to be dead. Killed in Osaka 5 years ago." "Many people are supposed to be dead," Naoko replied, her voice clear and controlled, lacking any trace of the frailty she had projected as Grandma Ghost. The sound of it, the first words many at the Black Lotus would have ever heard her speak, seemed to transform the space, confirming the reality of her altered presence. At her words, Takuma drew his weapon in one fluid motion, pointing it steadily at her center mass. Harada raised a hand slightly, a minimal gesture that prevented his bodyguard from advancing further, but allowed him to maintain his defensive position. 17 men in one night, Harada continued, his tone conversational despite the tension in the room, including my cousin Satoshi. 18, Naoko corrected calmly. Your cousin's bodyguard was not on the original list. The audacity of this correction hung in the air between them. In the world of the Yakuza, where respect was paramount and hierarchy strictly observed, such a casual acknowledgement of multiple murders, including a relative of the man before her, bordered on suicidal provocation. Yet, Harada's response was unexpected. A genuine laugh escaped him, short, cold, but containing real appreciation for the sheer boldness of her statement. You always were precise in your work. That was your reputation. He gestured toward a nearby chair. Sit. If I wanted you dead, Takuma would have acted already. Naoko assessed her options with the quick calculation of someone accustomed to dangerous situations, then took the offered seat. Not the posture of submission, but the controlled readiness of a predator temporarily at rest. She placed her hands on the table before her, empty and visible, a deliberate choice to appear non-threatening while maintaining her dignity. Why reveal yourself now? Harada asked, studying her. You've maintained this disguise for 2 years, cleaning toilets, enduring disrespect, becoming invisible. Why break cover? I didn't reveal myself, Naoko replied. Your lieutenant's clumsiness did. Harada conceded this point with a slight nod. True, though I suspect someone of your skill could have prevented the exposure if you truly wanted to, which makes me wonder if perhaps this revelation was inevitable, even intentional. His insight was met with silence, neither confirmation nor denial, merely the steady gaze of a woman who had perfected the art of revealing nothing. What I cannot determine, Harada continued, is why the most feared assassin in Asia would spend 2 years as a cleaning woman in my establishment, particularly after the Osaka incident. The bounty on your head is substantial. Many believed you had retired or died. The best place to hide is where no one wants to look, Naoko responded simply. Who notices the person cleaning their mess? Who remembers the face behind a mask bent over a mop? Invisibility isn't about disappearing. It's about being seen as something not worth seeing. This philosophy, delivered without bitterness despite her treatment at the Black Lotus, seemed to resonate with Harada. He nodded slowly, appreciating the strategy. Still, why here? Why my bar specifically? The question hung in the air as Naoko considered her response. Finally, she shifted slightly in her chair, her gaze moving beyond Harada to the window where the nightlights of Shinjuku created patterns against the glass. You're not here for me, Harada said suddenly, the realization dawning in his expression. You're waiting for someone. Her slight smile confirmed his theory, the first genuine expression to cross her face since removing the mask. Your perception is as sharp as your reputation suggests, Harada-san. The honorific, properly applied, and with appropriate respect, marked another shift in their interaction, from captor and captive to something approaching professional recognition between equals in their respective domains. Harada leaned back slightly, mental calculations visible in his eyes as he processed this new information. Next week, he said finally, the Taiwanese delegation. Naoko remained silent, her expression neutral once more, but something in her eyes confirmed his deduction. Chen Wei-lung, Harada continued, watching her face closely for reaction. The man has been seeking an alliance with our organization for months, persistent in his overtures. The man who ordered the death of my entire family, Naoko confirmed, her voice maintaining its control despite the weight of this statement. 7 years ago, my parents, my younger brother, even my grandmother, all to send a message that his authority had extended to Japanese territory. Comprehension settled over Harada's features. So, you've been here, cleaning my floors, serving my men, waiting patiently for Chen to appear. 2 years of preparation for a single opportunity. There was undisguised respect in his tone now. Few have such dedication to vengeance. Justice, Naoko corrected softly, not vengeance. A meaningless distinction to the dead, Harada observed, though I understand the sentiment. He signaled to Takuma, who kept his weapon trained on Naoko while backing toward the door. The bodyguard slipped outside briefly, whispered instructions to someone in the hallway, then resumed his position, watchful but no longer appearing quite as ready to fire at the slightest movement. You've had 2 years to learn our security, our patterns, Harada said, returning his attention to Naoko. Watching, listening, mapping every detail while being treated as furniture. My men made it particularly easy for you, I imagine? Yes, she acknowledged simply, though your lieutenant was especially helpful with his constant need to demonstrate superiority. The more he pushed, the more invisible I became to everyone else. Harada's expression darkened slightly. Daisuke will be disciplined for his disrespect. That won't be necessary, Naoko replied with quiet certainty, the implicit threat hanging between them. The tension was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Takuma opened it cautiously, then admitted a server carrying a tray with a bottle of premium whiskey and 2 glasses. The young man placed these items on the table with nervous deference, careful not to look directly at either Harada or the suddenly transformed cleaning woman before withdrawing quickly. What happens now? Harada asked as he poured 2 measures of the amber liquid. You've been exposed. Your target arrives in less than a week. Your carefully constructed cover is compromised. He pushed 1 glass toward Naoko, an offering between equals that would have been unthinkable hours earlier when she was merely Grandma Ghost. The gesture carried significance beyond the simple act, an acknowledgement of changed status that both recognized. That depends on you, Naoko replied, accepting the glass but not drinking. I have backup plans, of course, but my preference would be to complete my mission without unnecessary complications. Unnecessary complications? Harada repeated with a cold smile, such as the death of a potential business partner in my establishment. Chen Wei-lung represents significant financial opportunity for the Harada Gumi. His elimination would have consequences. All deaths have consequences, Naoko said, some more justified than others. Harada studied her for a long moment, then made a decision. He stood deliberately, removing his immaculate suit jacket and draping it carefully over the back of his chair. With measured movements, he unbuttoned his left cuff and rolled the sleeve up to his elbow, revealing an intricate tattoo that covered his forearm and disappeared beneath the fabric. Traditional Irizumi work of exceptional quality, depicting dragons and waves in brilliant color. In another life, he said quietly, I might have recruited you. Talent like yours is rare, even in our world. From an inner pocket, he produced a ceremonial tanto knife in a lacquered sheath. The weapon was clearly ancient, its handle worn smooth by generations of hands. He placed it carefully on the table between them, its significance unmistakable in Yakuza tradition. Chen Wei-lung ordered the death of my brother 6 years ago, Harada stated, his voice carrying the weight of long-contained fury. Masao was not involved in our family business. He was a doctor, a surgeon who treated children with burn injuries. His only crime was sharing my blood. Nyoko's expression shifted subtly at this revelation. A flicker of surprise quickly controlled. I wasn't aware of this connection. Few are, Harada acknowledged. I've maintained public business relations with Chin's organization while seeking the right opportunity. Unlike you, I lacked the patience for a 2-year infiltration. He poured more whiskey into both glasses, then raised his in a gesture that invited her to do the same. This time, Naoko lifted her glass, though she still didn't drink. To patience, Harada offered as a toast, then consumed his drink in one smooth motion. Naoko watched him carefully before taking a small sip of her own whiskey, enough to honor the ritual without compromising her alertness. The significance of this shared drink was not lost on either of them, a tentative trust being established between predators who recognized each other's capabilities. With deliberate movements, Harada took the tanto knife and drew the blade across his palm, creating a shallow cut that welled with blood, the traditional Yakuza ritual for the most solemn of oaths. Not as employer and assassin, he said, extending his bleeding hand across the table, as equals with a common enemy. Naoko considered the offer, understanding its full implications in the world they both inhabited. Then, with equal deliberation, she took the knife and made a matching cut across her own palm before clasping his hand firmly, their blood mingling in the ancient gesture of alliance. Agreed, she said simply. The door opened again at Harada's signal, and Takuma entered carrying an ornate wooden box. He placed it on the table before withdrawing to his position by the wall, his weapon now holstered, but still within easy reach. Harada released Naoko's hand and opened the box to reveal a ceremonial blue silk robe embroidered with the Harada family crest. The garment was clearly valuable, its craftsmanship extraordinary, representing formal acknowledgement within the clan structure. No more disguises, Harada said, presenting the robe formally. Tonight, you join us as yourself. The transformation of status was complete, from despised cleaning woman to honored ally in the space of a single evening. Naoko accepted the robe with appropriate respect, understanding that it represented not just alliance but protection within the Harada Gumi's territory. No one would dare mock or threaten someone wearing the Oyabun's colors. Chen arrives in 4 days, Harada said, returning to practical matters now that the formal alliance had been established. His security team has studied our patterns for months. They know our regular personnel, our procedures. But they don't know about me, Naoko completed the thought. The blue shadow is supposedly dead. Precisely. Harada gestured for her to follow him from the private room toward his office on the upper floor of the Black Lotus. We have preparations to make. An hour later, Naoko stood beside Harada in his private office, now dressed in the fine clothes provided to replace her cleaner's uniform. The blue silk robe was draped over her shoulders, its weight both physical and symbolic. Before them, on the large desk, were spread maps and security plans detailing the Black Lotus and surrounding areas. Chen's personal security includes at least 6 men with military training, Harada explained, indicating positions on the diagram. 2 remain outside, 4 accompany him at all times, all armed, though they'll surrender obvious weapons at the door as a courtesy. Naoko studied the plans with professional assessment. Your regular security positioning creates blind spots here and here, she noted, pointing to specific areas. Intentional, I assume, to provide your own men with advantages. Harada nodded approvingly. You noticed our security arrangements during your time as Ghost? Of course, she replied simply. I also noted which of your men are observant versus easily distracted, which ones maintain proper weapon discipline, and which ones drink too much on duty. This detailed awareness of his operation's weaknesses might have angered another leader, but Harada merely smiled with professional appreciation. This is why you'll command the operation. My men will follow your lead. Your reputation is well earned. For Naoko, the statement represented a dramatic reversal, from being ordered to clean Daisuke's deliberately spilled drinks to commanding the lieutenant and his men in a high-stakes operation. The irony wasn't lost on her, though her expression revealed nothing beyond focused attention to the tactical planning. They spent the next hour refining their strategy, with Naoko offering insights about Chen's typical security arrangements based on her extensive research. When they finally emerged from the office, the main bar area was empty, except for a few key Harada lieutenants who had been summoned for an urgent meeting. As Harada entered the room, with Naoko walking slightly ahead of him, the assembled men looked up expectantly. Their expressions shifted from attentive to confused as they recognized the woman accompanying their oyabun, not as a distinguished guest, but as the cleaning woman they had mocked and tormented for months. The cleaning woman? Daisuke voiced the collective shock, his usual arrogance temporarily displaced by genuine confusion. "Show proper respect," Harada instructed coldly. "This is Aoi Kage." The name rippled through the room like an electric current. Recognition dawned on faces as they processed this impossible revelation. The feared assassin known as the Blue Shadow had been cleaning their spills and emptying their ashtrays for 2 years. "The Blue Shadow is dead," Daisuke protested weakly, his face draining of color as he stared at the woman he had casually abused for months. "Clearly not," Harada replied dryly. Naoko approached Daisuke directly, her bearing completely transformed from the hunched, invisible presence he had known. Now she moved with the fluid grace of a predator, her eyes sharp and assessing as they met his. The lieutenant flinched instinctively, expecting retribution for his countless cruelties. Instead, she merely looked at him with cool evaluation. "Your disrespect was useful," she said calmly. "It confirmed no one would look closely at me." Daisuke attempted to recover his composure, bowing deeply in a belated show of respect. "Aoi Kage-san, please accept my sincere apologies for any offense." Harada cut off this performance with a sharp gesture. "She doesn't need your apologies. She needs your obedience." He addressed the assembled men with the authority that had made him a successful oyabun for 15 years. "Aoi Kage will command the operation against Chen Weilong. You will follow her instructions as you would follow mine." The pronouncement left no room for question or challenge. These men who had spent years climbing the Yakuza hierarchy were now being ordered to take direction from someone they had previously considered beneath notice. The reversal was complete and absolute. From her position at the bar, Junko watched this transformation with quiet amazement. Unlike the Yakuza members who had actively tormented Naoko, the bartender had shown basic decency to the cleaning woman, occasionally intervening when Daisuke's cruelty became excessive. Now she observed the dramatic shift in power dynamics with a mixture of awe and understanding, recognizing that she had been serving drinks to a legend without ever knowing it. Over the next 3 days, preparation for Chen Weilong's arrival intensified. The regular pattern of the Black Lotus was subtly altered to accommodate the joint operation, with security personnel receiving specialized briefings and training under Naoko's direction. In the private dojo behind Harada's residence, Naoko led selected Harada men through specific techniques and formations, designed to counter Chen's security team's expected responses. Her expertise was immediately apparent, her instructions precise and authoritative. The same men who had dismissed her as irrelevant now hung on her every word, watching her demonstrations with undisguised respect. "Your primary objective is containment," she explained to the assembled team. "Prevent Chen's security from interfering once the operation begins. No unnecessary casualties." Daisuke, now painfully deferential in her presence, raised a question. "Will you eliminate Chen yourself, Aoi Kage-san?" "Yes," she replied simply. "He is mine alone." Despite his efforts to ingratiate himself with his newfound superior, Daisuke couldn't entirely mask his discomfort at taking orders from a woman, especially one he had humiliated repeatedly. Naoko noticed this lingering resistance and addressed it directly during a planning session. "You wanted attention," she told him, assigning him the most exposed position in the operation. "Now you'll have it." The statement carried clear warning: either perform flawlessly or face consequences. Daisuke accepted the assignment with a deep bow, understanding that his position within the Harada Gumi now depended on successfully supporting the woman he had once tormented. By the evening before Chen's expected arrival, the Black Lotus had been subtly transformed. Security positions were reinforced, escape routes secured, and contingency plans established for every conceivable complication. The bar itself appeared normal to casual observation, but beneath the surface, every element had been carefully calibrated for the coming confrontation. Naoko stood on the rooftop of the building, looking out over the Shinjuku nightscape as Harada joined her. The oyabun offered her a cigarette, which she declined with a small gesture. "Tomorrow ends a 7-year wait," Harada observed. Are you prepared for what comes after? The question addressed something they had not discussed in their tactical planning, the future beyond vengeance. Naoko considered it with the same careful attention she brought to all aspects of her work. I've lived as a ghost for so long, she said finally. I'm not entirely certain I remember how to exist as myself. Harada nodded understanding. Purpose sustains us, but it can also consume us. When vengeance is accomplished, the void it leaves must be filled with something else. They stood in silence for several moments, each contemplating the path that had brought them to this alliance. His brother's murder, her family's slaughter, the shared enemy who had irrevocably altered both their lives. Whatever happens tomorrow, Harada said finally, know that you have earned a place of honor in our organization, not through blood relation or traditional advancement, but through your own merit and sacrifice. For Naoko, who had spent years in isolation pursuing a single goal, this acknowledgement of belonging represented something unexpected, a potential future beyond the mission that had defined her existence. She didn't respond verbally, but her slight nod conveyed understanding of what was being offered. As they descended from the rooftop to complete final preparations, Naoko paused in the stairwell. There is something you should know about Chen, she said, information not included in our briefings. Harada turned to her with raised eyebrows, waiting. He travels with a personal good luck charm, a jade pendant he believes protects him from harm. He will not surrender it along with weapons, as it appears to be merely decorative, but it contains a concealed blade, small but coated with toxin. You know this how? Harada asked. Because I provided it to him, through intermediaries, 3 years ago, Naoko replied. A gift from a supposed admirer. He has carried his own death against his skin every day since, never suspecting. Harada's laugh was genuine this time, containing real appreciation for the layers of planning involved in her vengeance. Patience indeed, he said. Remind me never to underestimate you. No one at the Black Lotus will make that mistake again, Naoko observed as they continued downstairs to join the final briefing. The evening of preparation extended late into the night, with every detail reviewed and contingencies established for any possible complication. When the team finally dispersed to rest before the next day's operation, Naoko returned to the small room Harada had provided within the compound, a far cry from the tiny apartment she had maintained during her years as the cleaning woman. As she prepared for a few hours of sleep, she found herself looking at her reflection in the mirror, no longer the stooped masked figure of Grandma Ghost, but the woman she truly was. The scar along her face told its own story of survival, while her eyes reflected the focused determination that had sustained her through years of planning. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of that planning, justice for her slaughtered family, closure to the mission that had consumed her life. But for the first time since embarking on this path, she found herself considering what might lie beyond vengeance. The alliance with Harada offered possibilities she had not permitted herself to contemplate during her single-minded pursuit of Chen Wei-lung. She touched the blue chrysanthemum tattoo on her neck, the mark that had ultimately exposed her identity, but also connected her to a tradition of honor and obligation that transcended her individual quest. Tomorrow would determine not just Chen's fate, but her own. The Black Lotus underwent its final transformation as afternoon faded into evening. The regular furnishings remained, but each piece had been subtly repositioned to create clear sight lines and eliminate potential cover. Fresh flowers adorned tables and artful arrangements that would appear purely decorative to anyone unaware that their placement precisely marked optimal positions for Harada's security personnel. Lighting had been adjusted to create shadows in strategic corners while highlighting the central seating area where Chen Wei-lung would be received. Naoko surveyed these preparations from the private office above the bar, her trained eye noting each detail with professional appreciation. She wore a formal black suit that echoed traditional Japanese styling while allowing freedom of movement, the blue silk robe with the Harada crest draped elegantly over her shoulders. Nothing in her appearance suggested the cleaning woman she had been just days earlier. This was Aoi Keige in her true form, the legendary blue shadow prepared for her moment of justice. Chen's advanced security team has arrived, Harada informed her as he entered the office. They're conducting their standard sweep of the premises. And our people? Naoko asked. In position, as you instructed. Daisuke is coordinating the perimeter team personally. She nodded, appreciating the irony of her former tormentor now serving as her subordinate in this critical operation. Chen himself? 20 minutes out, according to our street surveillance. He's traveling with the expected security detail, 4 inside his vehicle, 2 in a follow car. Everything was proceeding according to their carefully constructed plan. After 7 years of waiting and 2 years of invisible observation, Naoko would finally confront the man responsible for her family's slaughter. The proximity of this long-sought moment brought no visible emotion to her face, only the same focused concentration that had made her legendary in certain circles. "It's time," she said simply, moving toward the door. Harada stopped her with a light touch on her arm, a gesture of familiarity that would have been unthinkable during her time as Grandma Ghost. "Whatever happens tonight, remember, our agreement. Chen is yours, but this remains Harada territory. Minimal collateral damage." "Understood," she confirmed. "My quarrel is with Chen alone. His security team will be neutralized, not eliminated, unless they force the issue." Satisfied with this reassurance, Harada led the way downstairs to the main bar area, where his most trusted lieutenants awaited final instructions. The men bowed deeply as Naoko entered, a stark contrast to their previous treatment of her. If the irony affected her, she gave no sign, addressing them with the calm authority of a natural commander. "Chen's security will conduct a secondary sweep upon his arrival," she explained. "They will request that the premises be cleared of regular customers. Harada-san will appear to reluctantly agree, but insist that his personal staff remain. You will be those staff, positioned exactly as we've rehearsed." The men nodded their understanding, each having memorized their specific role in the coming operation. Gone was any hint of the disrespect they had shown the cleaning woman. In its place was the focused attention given to a respected superior. "Questions?" Naoko asked, scanning their faces. When none were raised, she gave a single nod of approval. "Then take your positions. Chen Wei-lung has evaded justice for 7 years. Tonight, that changes." The Black Lotus settled into deceptive calm as evening fell. From outside, it appeared to be operating normally. Subdued lighting, occasional patrons entering and exiting. Nothing to suggest the carefully orchestrated trap waiting within. Junko maintained her position behind the bar, one of the few regular staff members included in the operation due to her family connections to the Harada Gumi and her previous decency toward Naoko. At precisely 8 o'clock, a sleek black Lexus with diplomatic plates pulled up outside the Black Lotus. It was immediately flanked by 2 less ostentatious vehicles containing additional security personnel. The advance team exited first, scanning the street before signaling that it was safe for their principal to emerge. Chen Wei-lung stepped from the Lexus with the casual confidence of a man accustomed to deference. At 53, he carried himself with the polished elegance of old money combined with new power, expensive suit tailored to perfection, gold watch gleaming discreetly at his wrist, every detail projecting calculated superiority. Around his neck, partially visible above his shirt collar, hung the jade pendant Naoko had mentioned to Harada, an innocent-seeming adornment that contained its own deadly secret. From her vantage point near Harada's private booth, Naoko observed Chen's arrival with outward calm that belied the intensity of her focus. This was the man who had ordered her entire family executed to send a territorial message. Parents, brother, grandmother, all slaughtered in their home while she was away on assignment. 7 years of planning, 2 years of invisibility and degradation, all leading to this moment. Chen's security team entered first, conducting a thorough sweep of the premises before allowing their employer to cross the threshold. The team leader, a hard-faced man with the vigilant eyes of former military, approached Harada with rehearsed politeness. "We'll need the establishment cleared of regular patrons, Harada-san," he stated, rather than requested. "Standard protocol for Mr. Chen's security." Harada affected mild annoyance, playing his role perfectly. "This is highly irregular. We've prepared specifically for your visit." "Mr. Chen's safety requirements are non-negotiable," the security chief replied firmly. After a moment of apparent consideration, Harada nodded reluctantly. "Very well, but my personal staff will remain to provide appropriate service." The security chief accepted this compromise with a curt nod, then supervised as the few regular customers, actually Harada's men positioned as part of the operation, were escorted outside. Within minutes, the Black Lotus contained only Chen's security detail, Harada's staff, and the key players themselves. Chen entered with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling every room he occupied, greeting Harada with the precise degree of respect calculated to acknowledge the Oyabun's position, while subtly asserting his own equal status. "Harada-san," he said with a slight bow, "it's been too long since our organizations have had the opportunity for direct discussion. I appreciate your willingness to meet personally." "The pleasure is mine, Chen-san," Harada replied with matching formality. "Please, join me. I've reserved our finest sake for this occasion." As they moved toward the private booth, Chen's gaze swept the room with the habitual assessment of someone who had survived multiple attempts on his life. His eyes passed over Naoko without particular interest. She was positioned as one of Harada's advisors, her face partially turned away. Nothing to trigger recognition of a woman he believed long dead. The two leaders settled into the booth, security personnel maintaining discreet positions throughout the bar. Junko approached with a ceremonial sake set, her movements graceful and precise as she prepared to serve the honored guests. Everything proceeded according to the established protocols of such high-level meetings. Formal pleasantries exchanged, business topics approached obliquely, mutual interests delicately suggested. Throughout this dance of diplomacy, Naoko remained in her peripheral position, waiting for the precise moment when security would be most relaxed. Chen's men maintained professional vigilance, but as the meeting progressed without incident, their posture gradually softened from acute alertness to routine surveillance. "I believe our organizations have complementary interests in several markets," Chen was saying, accepting a sake cup from Junko with casual dismissiveness, "particularly in the emerging digital currency sector. My technical people have developed methods for transaction anonymity that would benefit your operations considerably." "An intriguing proposition," Harada replied, maintaining the appearance of genuine business discussion. "Though I wonder about the practical security implications of such technologies." Chen smiled confidently. "Security is my specialty, Harada-san, both digital and physical." He gestured toward his watchful security detail. "I've survived 3 assassination attempts in the past decade. Preparation is everything." "Indeed," Harada agreed, meeting Naoko's eyes briefly across the room. The signal they had arranged. It was time. "Bring me proper Taiwanese liquor," Chen instructed Junko without looking at her. "This sake is acceptable, but I prefer something from home." "Of course, sir," Junko responded, bowing respectfully before withdrawing toward the bar. When she returned moments later, it was not Junko, but Naoko who carried the requested bottle on a serving tray. She approached with measured steps, her head slightly bowed in the picture of deference, though nothing remained of Grandma Ghost's hunched posture or submissive demeanor. Chen didn't bother to look up as she neared the table, his hand extended impatiently for the bottle. "Took you long enough, servant." "It's been 5 years, actually," Naoko replied, her voice clear and controlled. The familiar voice caused Chen's head to snap up, recognition and shock spreading across his features as he found himself staring at a ghost. "Impossible," he whispered. "You're dead." "Not quite," Naoko responded calmly. "Though my family is, thanks to your order." Chen's shock quickly hardened into calculation as he assessed the situation. His gaze darted toward his security team, only to find them already engaged by Harada's men, not in obvious confrontation, but in strategic positioning that effectively neutralized their ability to respond immediately. "Whatever grievance you believe you have," Chen began, switching tactics to diplomacy, "I'm certain we can reach an accommodation that benefits us both. Your skills are legendary, Aoi Kage. I could offer you contracts worth 10 times whatever Harada is paying." "This was never about money," Naoko replied, placing the tray on the table with deliberate care. "You had my family executed to send a territorial message, my mother, who never harmed anyone, my 14-year-old brother, my grandmother, who was 73 and could barely walk." For the first time, emotion entered her voice, not the wild rage of uncontrolled vengeance, but the cold, focused fury of justice long deferred. Chen recognized the distinction instantly, the color draining from his face, as he realized that no negotiation would deter her purpose. With the lightning reflexes that had made him a survivor, Chen reached for the jade pendant at his throat, the hidden blade Naoko had mentioned to Harada. Before his fingers could close around it, Naoko's hand shot out, catching his wrist in an iron grip. "That won't help you," she said softly. "The poison was neutralized months ago when you sent the pendant for cleaning. Another gift from an admirer, remember? The special solution to maintain the jade's luster." The realization that he had been outmaneuvered at every turn seemed to age Chen visibly. His security team remained frozen in their positions, each covered by Herida's men in a silent standoff that awaited resolution between the principals. "What happens now?" Chen asked, his voice steadier than might have been expected. Like many who live by violence, he had always known his end might come the same way. Naoko nodded toward the private room behind the bar, the same room where she had spent countless hours cleaning, unnoticed and disregarded. "Justice comes to everyone eventually." Harada gestured for his men to maintain their positions as Naoko escorted Chen toward the private room. To the Taiwanese businessman's credit, he walked with dignity, making no desperate appeals or attempts to flee. Perhaps he understood that this moment had been inevitable from the day he ordered the execution of an assassin's family. As the door closed behind them, Harada turned to the remaining security personnel. "Your employer has private business with Aoi Kage," he informed them with the authoritative calm that had made him a successful Oyabun. "I suggest you accept that this matter is beyond your intervention." The security chief's hand hovered near his concealed weapon, calculation evident in his eyes as he assessed the odds. "Mr. Chen pays us very well to ensure his safety." "He pays you to die for him if necessary," Harada corrected. "Is that truly your wish today? To die for a man who is already lost?" The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before the security chief made his decision, slowly lowering his hand. "We are contracted to protect him during business operations. This appears to be a personal matter." The thin justification for non-intervention was accepted by all parties, a face-saving formulation that allowed Chen's security to retreat without admitting defeat. Within minutes, they had withdrawn from the Black Lotus, their professional obligation technically fulfilled, even as they abandoned their employer to his fate. In the private room, matters proceeded with the solemnity appropriate to long-awaited justice. No violence was visible to those outside. No sounds penetrated the soundproofed walls. When Naoko emerged 20 minutes later, her expression revealed emotional closure rather than savage satisfaction. The culmination of 7 years' purpose achieved not through tortured vengeance, but through precise, controlled justice. Harada met her eyes across the room, a silent question in his gaze. "It is done," she confirmed simply. The Oyabun nodded once in acknowledgement, then addressed the room at large. "The evening's business is concluded. Tomorrow we return to normal operations." This pronouncement, delivered with casual authority, transformed the atmosphere from tense anticipation to subdued routine. The Haradagumi members began resetting the bar to its standard configuration, removing the specialized security arrangements and restoring the appearance of an ordinary high-end establishment. If anyone wondered about Chen Wei-lung's body, or the details of his final moments, they knew better than to voice such questions. For Naoko, the aftermath of vengeance brought neither the euphoria nor the emptiness she might have expected. Instead, she experienced a curious lightness, as if a weight she had carried for so long had dissolved, leaving her uncertain of her balance without its familiar presence. Dawn found her on the rooftop of the Black Lotus once more, watching as the first light of day transformed Tokyo's skyline from electronic glow to natural illumination. Harada joined her silently, offering a cup of green tea which she accepted with a small nod of thanks. "What will you do now?" he asked after several minutes of companionable silence. "Your vengeance is complete." Naoko considered the rising sun, the first morning in 7 years that didn't begin with a single-minded purpose driving her every action. "I've lived as a ghost for so long," she replied, echoing their conversation from the previous evening. "I'm not sure I remember how to live as myself." Harada watched the play of morning light across the city before responding. "There is a place for you in our organization," he said finally. "Not as enforcer or assassin, as strategist. Those who underestimate the overlooked can be defeated by someone who understands invisibility." The offer represented something Naoko had not permitted herself to contemplate during her years of single-minded pursuit, a future beyond vengeance, a purpose beyond the past. She had been so focused on achieving justice for her family that she had given little thought to what might follow. "I would need time," she said after consideration. To remember who I am when not defined by a mission. Harada nodded understanding. The offer remains open. In the meantime, you have sanctuary within our territory for as long as you wish. No one who knows your identity would dare trouble you here. As the morning progressed, the Black Lotus began preparations for another day of operation. Cleaning staff arrived for their morning duties, including a new woman named Yuriko, recently hired to replace the mysteriously departed Grandma Ghost. Yuriko moved nervously through her tasks, clearly intimidated by working in an establishment known to be Yakuza territory. Naoko, now dressed in the fine clothes provided by Harada rather than her cleaner's uniform, observed the young woman struggling with a heavy bucket. Without hesitation, she moved to assist, taking one handle while gesturing for Yuriko to maintain her grip on the other. "What is your name?" she asked as they carried the bucket together. "Yuriko, ma'am," the woman replied with nervous deference, clearly recognizing Naoko as someone of importance given her attire and the respect shown to her by the Harada staff. Naoko nodded, then turned to address the bar staff beginning their morning preparations. "Remember her name?" she instructed with quiet authority. "Everyone deserves that dignity." The staff straightened attentively, recognizing the command beneath the seemingly casual statement. To Yuriko directly, Naoko added, "No one will disrespect you here. You have my word." It was a small gesture, perhaps, but symbolically significant, breaking the cycle of disregard that had characterized her own experience as the invisible cleaner. Naoko directed the preparation of water and tea for the cleaning staff, another departure from previous practice where their basic comfort had been ignored. Later that morning, she joined Harada in his office to discuss the aftermath of Chen's disappearance. The Taiwanese businessman's security team had departed Tokyo immediately, unwilling to face questions about their employer's fate. Within certain circles, word had already spread that the legendary Aoi Kage had returned from the dead to deliver long-delayed justice, enhancing both her reputation and, by association, the Harada Gumi's standing. "The Chen organization will fragment without his leadership," Harada observed. "His lieutenants have been positioning themselves for succession for years. This creates both opportunity and risk for our interest in Taiwan. His second, Lin Zhao, is the most capable," Naoko replied, drawing on her extensive intelligence gathering. "But the youngest, Huang Wei, has the strongest street-level support. They'll fight amongst themselves for at least 6 months before any clear leadership emerges." Harada nodded appreciation for this analysis. "This is precisely why I offered you a position as strategist. Your understanding of these dynamics is invaluable." Their discussion was interrupted by a hesitant knock at the door. Takuma entered at Harada's acknowledgement, bowing respectfully before addressing them both. "Forgive the interruption, Harada-san, Aoi Kage-san. The new cleaning woman has discovered something during her duties." Harada raised an eyebrow. "Something concerning?" "She was cleaning the private room where—" Takuma paused delicately. "Last night's business was concluded. Behind one of the panels, she found what appears to be a listening device. Not ours." This discovery represented a significant security breach. Someone had managed to plant surveillance equipment in the heart of Harada territory. Naoko's expression sharpened with professional interest as she rose to inspect the device personally. In the private room, Yuriko stood nervously beside the wall panel she had removed while cleaning, revealing a sophisticated miniature microphone connected to a transmission unit. "I noticed the panel was slightly loose," she explained anxiously. "I was only trying to secure it properly, not pry into anything." "You did exactly right," Naoko assured her, examining the equipment without touching it. "This is professional grade, military or intelligence level, not standard criminal organization equipment." Harada's expression darkened. "Someone has been monitoring our private conversations." "For how long?" "Recently installed," Naoko determined after careful examination. "Within the last month, based on the battery configuration, and with considerable skill." This revelation cast the previous night's events in a new light. Had someone known of their plans regarding Chen? Was his arrival at the Black Lotus part of a larger scheme they hadn't detected? The implications were troubling for both Harada's security and Naoko's carefully executed justice. "I want every inch of this establishment examined," Harada ordered. "Every panel, fixture, and piece of furniture." As his men mobilized to implement this directive, Naoko studied the listening device with professional assessment. "This is an opportunity," she said finally. Harada looked at her questioningly. "Whoever planted this will be expecting to retrieve data, or at least monitor ongoing transmissions," she explained. "If we leave it in place but feed it controlled information, we can identify the interested party." Her strategic thinking confirmed Harada's assessment of her value beyond mere enforcement capabilities. "A counterintelligence operation," he nodded approvingly, "using their surveillance against them." "Precisely," Naoko agreed, "and when they move to retrieve their data or plant additional devices, we'll be waiting." This unexpected development offered Naoko something she had not anticipated needing after completing her mission against Chen: a new purpose, a reason to apply her skills beyond the vengeance that had defined her for 7 years. The challenge of identifying whoever had dared to spy on Harada territory appealed to her professional instincts and provided a natural transition from her previous single-minded focus. Later that afternoon, Naoko and Harada stood on the rooftop garden above the bar once more, the city of Tokyo spread before them in afternoon sunlight. They had established a preliminary counter-surveillance plan, positioning their own monitoring equipment to identify whoever came to maintain or retrieve the listening device. "A new mission already," Harada observed with a slight smile. "Perhaps you won't have time to wonder who you are beyond your vengeance after all." Naoko's expression softened slightly, not quite a smile, but a lessening of the intense focus that had characterized her for so long. "The shadows taught me patience," she replied. "Perhaps now they can teach others respect." Below them, through the rooftop access window, they could see into the main bar area where preparations for evening service were underway. Yuriko moved through her cleaning duties with greater confidence now, no longer intimidated by her surroundings. More significantly, the Harada men, who had once mocked and tormented Naoko, now treated the new cleaning woman with basic respect, acknowledging her presence, moving aside for her work, even occasionally offering a word of thanks. The cycle of disrespect had been broken through Naoko's unexpected intervention, creating ripples of change throughout the organization. What had begun as her personal quest for justice had transformed into something broader, a subtle shift in how the overlooked and invisible were perceived within Harada territory. For Naoko, this represented an unexpected form of legacy. Her family's memory had been honored through Chen's long-delayed justice, but perhaps her own mark on the world would be this more subtle influence, teaching those with power to recognize the humanity in those without. "I accept your offer," she said finally, turning to Harada. "A position as strategist, with one condition." Harada raised an eyebrow inquiringly. "The invisible remain my concern," Naoko stated. "The cleaners, servers, those overlooked by power, they will be treated with dignity in all Harada operations." It was an unusual condition from someone in her position, but Harada nodded without hesitation. "Agreed. Their improved treatment will actually enhance our security. People who feel respected are less likely to betray confidences or accept bribes." This practical justification allowed him to accept her humanitarian request without appearing to soften the organization's fearsome reputation. A diplomatic solution that satisfied both their needs. As they descended from the rooftop to continue preparations for identifying their mysterious observers, Naoko felt the first genuine sense of forward momentum she had experienced in years. The past would always remain part of her, the family she had lost, the years spent as a ghost, the careful execution of long-planned justice. But now there was also a future taking shape before her, unexpected paths opening where once there had been only a single driving purpose. The woman who had been invisible for so long now stood fully in the light, her true self acknowledged and her skills recognized. What had begun in tragedy and pursuit of vengeance had transformed into something she could not have anticipated. Not merely the restoration of justice, but the discovery of purpose beyond personal retribution. As evening approached and the Black Lotus prepared for another night of operation, Naoko took her place beside Harada to greet important clients. No longer the cleaning woman in the shadows, but the strategist whose insight and experience would help shape the organization's future. The blue chrysanthemum tattoo on her neck, once carefully hidden, now showed prominently above the collar of her elegant attire, a symbol of identity reclaimed, rather than concealed. 7 years of waiting, 2 years of invisibility, culminating not just in justice served, but in unexpected renewal. The shadows that had hidden her for so long now served a different purpose. Not concealment, but strategic advantage in a world that consistently underestimated those it failed to truly see.